My number two is The Matrix from 1999. Also a movie
Ooh,
that features a
trench
lot of,
coat to trench
I was
coat.
going to say, a lot of trench coats in this one too, though instead of gray, they're black. This is co-directed and co-written by Lana and Lily Wachowski, starring Keanu Reeves, Lawrence Fishburne, Carrie Ann Moss, and Hugo Weaving. The IMDb plot summary for folks who don't know what The Matrix is. When a beautiful stranger leads computer hacker Neo to a forbidding underworld, he discovers the shocking truth. The life he knows is the elaborate deception of an evil cyber intelligence. This movie, and why I put this on my list for several reasons, but the first one is that I was saw this movie when it came out. Not opening weekend, actually, it was 3 weeks later. I thought it kind of wrote it off, honestly, through the trailers, and when it starting to become a phenomenon, and when to go to see it. But I think what this movie does, not only is it just ooze cool, and everything is you can tell it's all the fashion in this movie is very highly designed, but it did a couple things. I mean, one thing it really did, which influenced me, was it brought a lot of subcultures together that weren't necessarily considered high fashion or cool, and made them immediately cool at the time. It made me interested in them. The cyberpunk aesthetics, the hacker aesthetics, rave, avant-garde culture. The directors kind of brought all these things together and exemplified that in the fashion and made that cool. And it wasn't some fringe, maybe weird thing that only a couple people were interested in. It was what everyone was interested in at the time. And actually, I'll pause there and just see. I'm sure you've seen the film before. Just curious, actually, when you came across it, at least if it was felt as much in India as it was in the States in terms of what became cool was everything associated with this film, especially the
Yeah,
fashion.
pretty much like you said. I don't think I watched this in the theater, but I was in a college dorm at that time, and I had this memory that you could walk down the hallways of the dorm, and every single computer in every single room had some scene of the Matrix playing at all
Oh,
times.
yeah,
It
yeah.
was sort of unanimous. Like if you went to a friend's room to have a conversation, you had to watch a couple of scenes of the Matrix,
Mm-hmm.
so it was so synonymous to our lives. If you hadn't put this on the list, I probably would have, because it
Mm-hmm.
was defining just of the age we were in. And like you said, like it did something groundbreaking, and it's of course the clothes, the black and the
Mm-hmm. The
fitted
leather.
clothing and the
Yeah.
leather, but it's about the attitude,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all these people, like you said, who are fringe or sort of not in the mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
but they get a chance to actually kick butt.
Yeah. Yep.
And the action set pieces and the special effects, they're all kind of intertwined with their internal as well as their external appearance and what they're wearing. It's such a cleverly done thing. Like these images of Neo bending and the bullets flying and the
Mm-hmm.
trench coat flying, like they are embedded in at least our generation's minds and globally,
Mm-hmm.
so what could be more cinematically stylish than that?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah. And the other subculture that I felt this film really exemplified is also like that nerd culture, which
Yeah,
it's hard to imagine this now, where I do feel like nerds, for better or worse, have taken over the world and taken over culture. But back
right.
then, I'll self-admit to being a nerd, especially growing up. Like we weren't given that kind of respect, and we weren't the cool people in the movie. It was like, oh, there's the weird hacker in the corner. Here, the hackers are the stars of the film, and not only that, they look really awesome, and then they
Yeah.
set all these fashion trends moving forward. I mean, I started wearing more black after this movie. I had the small, like little sunglasses that everyone had, like look like the Neo sunglasses. That fashion trend, I jumped on that too. And it's like, oh, computers and hackers and all this kind of internet culture is now become cool through this film, which definitely, and a lot of that had to do again with the fashion, groundbreaking at the time. And again, I related to that as a nerd and actually took some fashion cues. Not letting like skin tight leather or anything like that. I'll want to caveat that, or long trench coats, but just wearing the black and having the small
Yeah.
sunglasses. I definitely looked up to these guys as style icons for sure.
There are many of you all around me. And this is probably why this is not on my list, because not that I was cool, but I was not part of the nerd culture per se.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, of course, the coolness of this movie was undeniable, but it wasn't personal. But
Mm.
I could see how this was transforming people all around me, and it was pretty sort of night and day. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, one thing too, that the theme wise, that I think this movie, I especially because I knew this would be on the list for me, just because of how it affected my kind of personal, what I thought was fashionable, and
yeah,
also like connected with me a bit on a personal level. was paying a lot more attention to the fashion and things in this viewing of this movie. It really kind of struck me, this movie, we could talk about this probably for almost every episode in terms of the amount of themes that this movie covers and the things this movie does. But one of the things that I think the movie is a lot about is expressing your inner self. The movie takes place, there's the real world where everyone sort of dresses sort of post-apocalyptic, kind of dirty sweatshirts and jeans. Basically, they don't look very good, but they go into the Matrix and you can choose how you look in the Matrix, much like picking an avatar in a video game. So each of these characters could design their own clothes, they could design their own hair, they could design their own look when they're going to the Matrix, and that is like their own expression of who their true self is. Which maybe society would like frown upon or look down upon, or you couldn't, you wanted to conform. So, that's how you look in the post-apocalyptic real world. But in the Matrix, you're free to be more of yourself. And that is expressed through clothes. I think that is one of the things that fashion, like I was saying at the beginning of this episode, really can do. And there's one scene that is this movie is so visual, but there's one sequence that really stood out to me when I was looking at it through the fashion lens. Is there's a scene where they're in the real world, and to go into the Matrix, they have to all connect into a chair and stick like a cable in their backs and then enter through a phone ringing. And there's this incredible camera move where it's circling around all of the cast who are lying down in their chairs in the real world about to go into the Matrix. And they all look really crappy and, in their, real world kind of gray garb. And then the camera's cutting back and forth between the camera circling them in their chairs and the camera circling a phone that's ringing in the Matrix world. And then the camera swings around and all of a sudden you see the entire cast in their cool Matrix garb in a pose like it's a cover of Vanity Fair, just like standing there looking so badass as like Morpheus goes up and picks up the phone and like, we're in. And like that whole thing of like they've transformed themselves from a gritty real world onto like a magazine cover was just like, oh, that's definitely like a lot of what this movie's about. Is expressing yourself through clothes. I thought that was just so so brilliant and so cool. I mean, it's funny actually too. And when I was rewatching this, kind of like googling around for some of the outfits, just like, oh, I wonder, what the how if you can buy these and things. Realizing that this trend, I mean, I think as 90s are back, the Matrix look is back. People are wearing black coats, small sunglasses, chunky shoes. Like if you look at any of the young kids, or like, there are photos of like Julia Fox and Bella Hadid walking around like in Matrix looks. And it was like 2019, 2018, I think there was a fashion show all like that looked exactly like right out of the Matrix. So like even the style was associated with the 90s is now coming back, but it's the Matrix means 90s or at least late 90s, which is pretty cool. Amazing that this movie still has that much of an impact on the fashion world.
Look at you being a fashionista with Bella Hadid and all the people. I love it.
You got to know what the kids are doing out there, But yeah, this movie, I mean, I know we didn't talk about the film much, but I'll just say classic, still holds up, just absolutely fantastic, amazing effects, amazing story, action. Keanu Reeves, incredible performance, and just covers a lot of different things, but we'll take the fashion one for our podcast.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say two more things. I kind of went in to watch this movie a little bit with some, skepticism, because this movie, like I was saying, was just so overplayed in my mind. And since my college days, undergrad days, I have not revisited this movie because I just was like, I'm done with this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to go back to this. And I was sucked into it right away, like how interesting the storytelling is and the way it's put together. So I was pleasantly surprised to rewatch it. And then number two, not that he didn't stand out for me earlier, but Lawrence Fishburne is the actual cool cat of the movie. I mean, Neo, of course, is Neo, but what he does is such an amazing performance. I wish he was recognized more for a role like this. If this movie came out now, he probably would be. Back in the day, such a performance just wasn't, but he's just so great and he's cool, but it's a very layered performance because he has to kind of show that he knows what's going on, but yet be this mentor, but yet be real, but also unreal. It's a very complex performance. So I thought he was great.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And it's interesting, like at the time when it came out, I liked the movie, but very quickly I sort of kind of became, I don't know, jaded with it being kind of a bit overplayed. I didn't really like the sequels. I still don't think they're very good. And it's really only the more I've seen it since it initially came out, the more I can really just realize that, this is an instant classic and definitely one of the best 90s movies, one of the most 90s movies. It's something that really stands the test of time. Forget about all the other ones that they made, which aren't really very good.
Yeah.
But this movie just is so fantastic.
Great score too. I mean, that's the
Yes.
other thing. Like all of the coolness of the clothes and the shots and the special effects, the music is an integral part of that. I mean, I remembered so much of the music the moment the movie started playing. I was like, oh my gosh, I do remember the soundtrack so clearly.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We just did our soundtrack episode and I mentioned this almost made it onto my
Yes.
list. But this is a soundtrack I still listen to a lot. At the time, I was like, the CD probably melted in my car.
Yeah.
I listened to it so much. I just loved the soundtrack, but you know, it's still definitely dated. It feels like a 90s sort of, you know, big beat techno soundtrack, but it just makes it cool. It makes all the outfits cooler, the movie cooler. It's very cool. That's the Matrix is.
Apparently
It's
the
cool.
kids are doing it too. So,
And the kids are still doing it. It's
cool.
exactly. It's back, guys. The Matrix is back. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.